Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and this time, as we are going through the life of Joseph, we saw his introduction and interaction um, with the two uh, with the two workers for Pharaoh, the cupbearer and then the baker. Again, we don't know their names, just their titles. And for the cupbearer, he had a dream, and Joseph interpreted that dream as he was able to go back into his service as cupbearer. Well, the baker sees that and he thinks, hey, that sounds pretty good to me. And so he is eager to share with Joseph his dream, but something not doesn't go quite the same. So with that, turn back to Genesis chapter 40 with me. We are going to verse 16. Verse 16 of Genesis chapter 40. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 baskets on my head. So, before we get into his dream here, really break it down, it makes a lot of sense why he's so eager and he's so excited, uh, because he just saw his buddy, the cupbearer, is in prison, and it could be maybe the same thing happened to them, and they're both in prison. My guess is, though, there's a difference because of the different results from the dreams, and so I think that is. I think there is a difference in the actions that both of them did that landed them in prison. Again, we don't know what those are. We can only speculate, right? With Cupbearer, maybe there was a thought that he was trying to poison Pharaoh, and but clearly that didn't pan out, and so therefore he was released from prison. The baker, um, my guess is he probably tried to hurt Pharaoh by his cooking, whether it was not properly cooking something or deliberately trying to get him sick or to kill him. So let's see though what the dream is. So continuing at the end of 16. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. So again, very simple. There's not a lot of detail here, which is a little bit of a contrast when it comes to the dreams that Pharaoh has, that Joseph interprets later on in the book of Genesis. And I think that's interesting to see that. Uh, with with this here, both dreams, not a lot of detail, pretty straightforward. Both of them deal with the number 3 as well, which we talked about last time. Whenever a number is brought up in prophetic or apocalyptic genre or passages, you always want to say, okay, what's special about this number? So the number 3 was 3 days until a sentence was passed down to release the cupbearer. And so the same thing will be here, but the phrase, I think the big phrase here, but the birds were eating out of the basket on my head. Whereas with the cupbearer's dream, it just says Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, uh, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Talking about after the vines budded, the branches budded. I mean, so there is no contrast or negative participle, um, the word but, right? And so um, there is no negative connection. Whereas here he goes, okay, here's what I was doing, making cakes for Pharaoh, all sorts of baked goods for him. It sounds very much like the cupbearer's dream, but then you see this word at the second part of verse 17, but the birds. And I think that is where Joseph goes, uh-oh, it's not going to go the way that he thinks it's going to go. And then, too, just the imagery as well. The birds were eating out of the basket on my head. Something is being taken away. Something is being seized and taken away. And he's already in prison. So what more can be taken away? You can guess it, right? He is about to be sentenced to death. So let's go on with Joseph's answer and interpretation, though. Now, Joseph answered, verse 18, and said, "This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days." So, again, very much like the cupbearer's dream. Okay, here's the significance of the number 3, and it's 3 days as well. So you're thinking, okay, we're at a good spot with the baker too, it seems. But then, verse 19, in 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. We'll get into that end part here in just a second, but I think this use of speech and this use of grammar is really key here. When it says, in 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, that could mean that he is just getting his attention, because you actually see the same phrase in Joseph's interpretation of the cupbearer's dream in verse 13. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. Whereas here, it's in 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, which is the same as verse 13, but then from you. And it's, could it be sarcasm? Not sarcasm. Could there be an element of dark humor? I don't think so. I think he's just making the emphasis of, look, you thought that your interpretation was going to go as well as the cupbearers, because your dreams had some similarities, but that's not the case. It is much worse for you. And then, of course, it gets to the sentence itself, hanging, and the birds eat the flesh from you. So the idea of the birds eating the basket is actually eating him. And so it's just like, oh, it's just this really dark sentence. And so, but now you're thinking, okay, well, you've made these interpretations, and the only dreams you've had so far is that you are supposedly going to be respected amongst your father, your mother, and your brothers, and that clearly has not gone well. And so you almost think, would Joseph ever doubt, okay, I've had these dreams, I've made these interpretations, none of them have come true yet, right? And that's the point. It's all in God's timing. But here he's thinking, okay, again, Joseph hasn't had these dreams, but he's making these interpretations. But I think he's changed, right? Whereas before he just tells these dreams of grandeur, and there was no really like, and the Lord is the one that interprets, which we looked at last week. But here he's made a change where, yes, he's still interpreting, but he knows that the Lord is the one who does the interpretation. So could there be a level of doubt for Joseph? Maybe. Like, he may be thinking, will this one come true? But that's possible. But I think he's grown to the point where that doubt is not there when it comes to these 2 dreams that he just interpreted, which is validated by the end of the chapter, verse 20. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. So I think that's significant too, right? It's not just a 3 days till a random day. It's Pharaoh's birthday. He made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. So recognizing them, basically. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Verse 21 is the fulfillment of the first dream. and its interpretation. Verse 22, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. So verse 22 is the fulfillment of the second dream and its interpretation. Uh, but then we have a really sad verse here. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him, which was the only thing that he asked of the cupbearer in verse 14 is that he was to remember Joseph when he goes back to Pharaoh and to his service, and he doesn't. He forgets about him, and you may be thinking, okay, didn't we just talk about last time how the Lord is the one who delivers? Yes, true. But we also talked about how he does so in his timing. Well, that's true when it comes to those who he delivers, but it's also true when it comes to those who the Lord judges. Yes, the Lord will judge the wicked. That is seen throughout Scripture and throughout time. But the thing is, he doesn't judge the wicked in our mindset. When we see somebody that is being judged, whether it's the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case or some other smaller case, or some really big case. We want judgment now. We want it passed down now. We don't want to wait about it. We want this to be resolved right away. And don't get me wrong, that's so easy to want because we want justice, right? Uh, but the Lord is at the same time. He is patient. And so, because of that, there are some times where we think somebody who has wronged us should be disciplined for that, and that's true. But we think it should be happening right away, whereas the Lord has that discipline in mind for a different time, and most likely in a different way that we never even thought of. And when it comes to those who reject Jesus and go against believers, that judgment is coming. It's just not in the timing that we want. So, in the same way that the Lord delivers the righteous in his timing, the Lord will also judge the wicked in his timing. I think that's the thing to really see behind the dreams and the interpretations of the cupbearer and the baker, because it shows Joseph that not only will your righteousness be showered upon you, or the results of your righteousness, the deliverance from prison, the deliverance from being a slave in Egypt. Not only will those things pass and you will be seen as righteous, but the wickedness that will be done against you, that will come to a head as well. Now, granted, the brothers are not put into slavery, even though one is put into prison for a time. We'll get to that later. But they do have a sword of judgment that falls upon them. And so we will look at that later, though, later on. But thanks for being here with me today, looking at the second dream, its interpretation and the result from that, and seeing how God again works in his timing. Thanks.